Greetings. Today we want to welcome Brianna Wu, who is the co-founder and head of development at Giant Spacekat, the game studio nearby, and is also on a couple of podcasts at Relay FM, Isometric, which is about the game industry, and Rocket, which I think is about assorted geekery topics. So welcome, Brianna.
Thank you so much for coming today. All right. Well, I want to thank Google for having me today. And, Coase, I know you were responsible for getting me here, so I definitely appreciate that. My name is Brianna Wu. I'm head of development at Giant Spacekat. I'm kind of an expert in the Unreal Engine. And, when I got into this field, like most software engineers, I did this because I love engineering. I love programming. I love all this geeky stuff. When I was a child, I remember my parents were so hesitant to get me a computer because they knew that the moment they did, I would just stay in my room nonstop and never leave the house. So when I find myself, especially in this last year, kind of being an unintentional figure for women in tech, I just want to let you know this isn't why I got into this field in the first place. And that leads to our first slide. Like, why do we have to talk about this? What I've discovered along the way is that we really don't have a choice, women in this field, to talk about gender issues. These things that we're going to be talking about today, they really make or break the careers of women in this field. Often, sometimes I sit there and I listen to my male colleagues in the field and I watch what they tweet or what they talk about. And it really amazes me just how little thought they have to kind of apply to some of these social things that a lot of women engineers have to talk about and think about every single day. Little things like being talked over in meetings, not being recommended for promotions. And Google itself has done a lot of really wonderful work on unconscious bias. So what I want you to know is I would rather be up here talking about anything else today. Unreal Engine, implementing Unreal in Android, OpenGL, just about anything. But the only way it's going to get better for me and the other women that work in this field is by talking openly about that. So this is going to be a presentation today. I am not Oprah Winfrey. I'm a software engineer, and this is just going to be, I'm going to lay it out on the table for you the same way I would a software bug. So, when I made this talk a few years ago, I was on my way down to WWDC, and I kind of threw it together, on a whim. And what really struck me at the time is these issues of gender in tech had really come to a head. This was early in 2014. My friend Julianne Horvath received a lot of gender-based harassment at GitHub. I'm sure you read about that. There was a founder that was accused in some really horrific ways of beating up his girlfriend 152 times on tape. You had things like code babes coming out, and Google, which I think speaks to your credit now, had released your numbers of diversity in the workforce. I think it's really worth noting that when that story came out in 2014, I and a lot of people were like, this isn't so good. But with you being open with that number, you started to see a trend of other companies like Apple bringing that number out, and it's not any better. So, I think that speaks to your credit. And for me, every single time I give this talk, it's more and more frustrating to me because, there are these incidents that break out about what women in tech are facing that make the news. And every single time, it just gets longer and longer and longer. It got to the point where I couldn't even update these slides because it would just keep going through it for 10 minutes. So we're just going to go through it super quickly right here. And for me, one of the most bizarre experiences of my life is, I prepared this talk before Gamergate happened to me. I don't know if you're aware of what's happened to me in this year. I'm up to 165 death threats in the last 11 months in this field. I had to talk to the FBI and prosecutors, this week about updates in my case and trying to get some of these things prosecuted. So, What I've kind of unintentionally found is by speaking out on these issues, it's literally put my life in danger. So I hope that kind of communicates to you how strongly I feel about being up here talking about this today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 9 things very quickly. And there's going to kind of be a negative and there's going to be a positive. So what we're going to be talking about is some unconscious things that men in this field kind of tend to do. And before we get into this, I just really want to make this clear. Google has done some amazing work on unconscious bias. And it's really important to note these problems, if you do them, do not make you a bad person. I myself have some of this same unconscious bias myself. Sometimes, I remember I was at Apple 2 years ago. I was sitting there and a man was trying to sell me a computer and a woman was trying to sell me a computer. And I found myself unconsciously realizing I was talking more to the man about my computer needs. And I'm a woman in tech figure. We all have problems with these kind of unconscious biases. So I just want you to know this is not personal. This is just talking about a problem in an objective way. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is you need to stop treating sexism like it's just another controversy to discuss. There is an inevitable pattern that happens. 2 days ago, I wrote a piece for Polygon praising Kojima's team for making women a playable character in Metal Gear Solid 5. Again, this got quite a bit of sexist controversy. This is a piece I didn't think it would be controversial because I was actually praising an aspect of the game for, again, they got a lot of feminist criticism. And what I found happened was, although my response was a lot more positive than usual, I was inundated with men talking to me, emailing me, writing me, dynamiting it to my house, doing whatever, kind of wanting to discuss it with me. And this is a really common theme when we're talking about sexism in the workplace. This is not like talking about the ending of Lost or a TV show. This is not like trying to talk about, is it a blue dress or a gold dress? These are deeply, deeply personal issues for all of us. And what ends up happening is sometimes when you try to talk about your lived experiences in this field, you'll have male engineers that will come up to you and they start talking about it like it's a problem of implementing a framework, right? Like they are completely objective and just trying to think through it. And what I think they don't realize in that moment is it's a real unconscious problem. Because what you were doing is kind of saying, prove to me that you're right. And there's an unconscious message there that my lived experiences are not, your opinions on this trump my own lived experiences. This is not a very helpful way to do it. What you're unconsciously doing is when I say, look, I've had X problem of sexism with X, Y, and Z, and you're like, yeah, prove it to me. Yeah, well, have you thought about this? Oh, well, it's just X, Y, or Z. You are dismissing my life and the difficult things that I've gone through. What we need you to do is to start showing basic sensitivity instead. I want to give you an example. I had a really good lifelong friend of mine that went through a divorce a few years ago. I knew his wife, I knew his child. And, when my friend was sitting there talking to me about his divorce, I didn't sit there and say, hey, but did you really try to make her happy? Were you really present there? I know you feel like she's being unreasonable on this, but I'm sure it was just blah. Like, that would be unbelievably obnoxious, right? But that is what happens every single time that women start talking about our experiences in tech. And again, this is not intentional. But what men in this field end up doing is telling us that our own interpretation of our own lives is incorrect. And you need to understand when we talk about this stuff, it is very difficult for us. It is emotionally risky. We are trusting you. That leads us into this. This is something that happened back in 2014. I'm a woman in my 30s, okay? If I'm telling you I'm getting catcalled down the street, like, trust me, that's something that's really happening. I'm an engineer. So, I'm talking about being out in San Francisco at WWDC and getting harassed constantly on the street. So I tweet about this, and I end up getting literally hundreds of responses to this, telling me that my interpretation of my own life is wrong. This happens all the time in technology. Again, this is very hurtful. So what we need you to do instead is to stop doing that. Again, this is every single day of our lives. There's some things that you have to live to experience. And let me give you an example. We talked a lot this year about police violence towards people of color, particularly black people. I have the privilege of being white in our society. When I get pulled over by the cops, I don't have to stress that, that the cops are going to be violent to me. And a lot of people in this room today have that same privilege. I can't speak to any number of experiences in life. And that is true for all of us. So when someone is black and they're telling you about their experiences with law enforcement, you need to just listen to it and understand that that lived experience trumps your own hypotheses about the situation. If someone gay is telling you about coming out to their parents or the discrimination they faced as a child, you need to listen to them. If someone is transgender and they are telling you about the difficulties in transitioning, you need to listen to them. And even if the opinion were hypothetically incorrect, the emotion that that person is feeling is absolutely true. I want to tell a very quick story about this related to this point. So a few years ago, they were doing a study on Alzheimer's patients who have this phenomenon of when you put them in assisted living care facilities, they wake up, they're terrified, they're confused, they're scared, they think they should be home, and they're not. They're in a strange hospital. So what they would end up doing is constantly leaving this hospital and going down to the bus stop, where they would be waited on for hours. And what this study found out is that the people in the hospital would go down and start yelling at these poor, elderly people that were suffering from a disease. What you need to understand is in that situation, even if if the facts of the situation were not that they were in a place they weren't supposed to be, their terror was absolutely real. Their frustration was absolutely real. So when these hospital employees were coming down and yelling at them, they didn't realize that their emotions in that situation were very true. So what you need to do again is start just simply respecting those lived experiences. These are our lives. These are our stories. When you respect our lived experience, you end up respecting us as individuals. Oh, this one really makes me frustrated. So there is a phenomena in when you talk about women in tech issues that I swear, it is like you're in court and all of a sudden, like you end up getting it flipped and you end up talking about how these issues affect men. It is amazing to me just how instantly the script flips, and I find the subject if I'm talking about the things I face, the subject instantly comes to if it's fair to men. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, Apple had a rather large event. They were talking about the iPad Pro, new Apple TV, and I was live tweeting a few thoughts about it. I couldn't help but note for the first 30 minutes of it that there were barely any women on stage. So I tweet something to the effect of, well, here are all Apple's white guys, here are all Microsoft's white guys, and now we've got Adobe's white guys coming on stage. I'm deluged with tweets from people saying, well, you can't have quotas for women. You can't do this. How dare you insinuate that men shouldn't be on stage? Which is a really, really, really unhelpful response. I want to talk a little bit about where that comes from. You may have heard the word privilege a little bit lately. And the truth is, men in this field are kind of blind to how great you've got it. I don't think you understand what it's like to go to an engineering event and be the only person that looks like you there. I don't think you understand what it's like to go to a recruiting event and have people talk to your husband, assuming he's the engineer when he can't even update the software on his iPhone. You know, this entire system has been built for you, for your comfort. So when we start talking about other people's comfort, you're so used to it working for you that just the slightest bit of upset, there's a lot of defensiveness that really happens very quickly with that, and it's not helpful. Again, this is not about you. And I promise you, every single woman engineer in this room has heard these opinions 100 times before, like a tape on repeat, with all respect. You know, I have heard the argument against quotas for women in tech hundreds of times this week. You know, there's a really, really beautiful thing called the ring theory that I'd like to talk about. So, you know, the idea is how not to say the wrong thing to someone. So the idea is you are right here in the center of the circle when something goes wrong for you. So imagine if you have cancer, or you've just lost your spouse, or you're going through a divorce, or your parents have died, you know, something really, or you've gotten 165 death threats in a year. You know, imagine you were here in the center of the circle. This is not a good place to be. So what this psychologist figured out is when you were in the center of the circle, she had cancer. She had a colleague come to her while she was in the hospital recovering from cancer surgery who said to her, well, you know, you need to realize this cancer isn't all about you. It's affecting people in our department. And she thought a lot about that conversation and why that was so obnoxious. So there's this thing called the ring theory. So at the center of the circle, which again is not a good place to be, is the aggrieved. In the outer limits of the circle might be like close family members, loved ones, your spouse. On the outer circle might be colleagues, and on the thing here might be strangers. So the idea is comfort flows in, grievance flows out. So if you're not in the center of the circle or in one of these inner rings, inevitably kind of making it about you is unfortunately obnoxious. What you need to do is very simple. Just listen instead. Okay, this is a really big one. I want to talk very openly and honestly about this. You know, I'm a 38-year-old engineer. I don't have any children. You know, my husband and I made the choice to really hyper-focus on our careers. I have been blind to this for a long time. And I was very blind to this until I had women with children come work for me, or, you know, people on my staff get pregnant. In the game industry where I work, we talk a lot about things like death threats, rape threats, you know, sexual harassment, women getting hit on at conventions. Something we are almost silent about is the way we treat women with children in tech. And yeah, this doesn't personally affect me, but I want to tell you straight up, in my career, I've seen more women leave over this issue than anything else. You know, someone in the society has to have the children. It's not like women made a choice about this, right? And what I think people don't understand is how ridiculously expensive childcare is. Here in Massachusetts, do you know that having daycare for your child is as expensive as tuition at UMass? I want you really to think about that. Every single year your child is in daycare, that costs tuition and fees. Absolutely. It's unconscionable, you know? This is a really big deal. So what ends up happening when women have, you know, children in tech is they end up slowly, subtly being shown the door. And I've seen this, again, I have unconscious biases too. And what I found at first when my employee with the child, you know, she got pregnant, my co-founder, and I found myself wrestling with all these unconscious biases. is Amanda going to be present at our workplace? Is she going to be able to get her job done? Is she going to start talking about her kids nonstop? Which was absolutely wrong for me to think. I've thought about that and I've grown from that. This is an unconscious bias that a lot of people have. What you need to know, and this is for parents of all genders, not just women, part of respecting a parent in the workforce means respecting their children. That means if a parent needs to leave at 5 to go pick their child up, respecting that person means respecting that their family comes first. This is really, really important. This is a really hard one, and I've run into this a lot in Boston. I can't tell you how many networking events I've been to in a bar at night with a bunch of dudes in their 20s drinking. Right here in Boston. There was one I went to a while back that was right across the street. What has happened in the field of computer science and engineering is this is a field that was built from the ground up to be by men for men. And I want to stress this is unconscious bias. But what ends up happening is you have a culture of networking that is built to serve men in the way that you like to network, like going to a bar and having beer. Let's take that example for a minute, because I'd like for you to think about it. So let's say you were an engineer at Google in your 20s, and you choose to go have a meeting out with the guys on your team at the bar next door after you leave. Let's think about how that's affecting women. So if you're a woman in, say, your 20s, I think you may not know that doesn't feel emotionally very frequently like a safe place for you. Like a lot of guys drinking heavily, and you're the lone woman there. I can think of 3 specific friends that have been sexually harassed in that situation to the point that they've been forced to leave their company, and HR hasn't helped them. It's not the best situation. If you're a woman in your 30s, maybe you have children. How many moms do you know that really want to go hit a bar at 8 o'clock at night when their kids have to go to school the next day? This is one of these situations where the system has been built to work for a very certain kind of person, and it very unintentionally excludes a lot of people. And let's be honest, networking is how you make careers. It makes or breaks it. This is really important. So what we need people to do, what I need everyone in this room to do, is to think about widening your network. If Google has a networking meeting or recruitment meeting to bring in engineers, maybe don't have it at a bar at night. Maybe have a luncheon here at 1 o'clock like we're having right now. Maybe do it earlier. It's not enough to just simply believe that women need to be included. I'm a software engineer. If I go write some code for my game and it doesn't run, the problem is with my code. I don't sit there and go, well, I just don't know why it's working. We'll just keep compiling it, and that will be that. The method that we use to recruit engineers in our field is not working. I've heard from so many people when they tell me, well, we put a job posting online and no women applied, and that's just the end of that. We have made so many advancements in the last 15, 20 years, and yet we can't look at the hiring process and realize it overlooks a lot of candidates. Let me tell you a story. This is a story of how the lead engineer at my team came to work at my company. So this is a woman that was fresh out of college, and she had not gone the straight and narrow. She didn't get a CS degree and then just instantly get into the workforce. She had some life adventures along the way. So she had been working for us part-time, and we were just dazzled by her work. She was doing technical rigging in 3D, which is a very, very difficult process. We loved her work, and we kept encouraging her to apply to the lead engineer position, and she didn't do it. I asked her to keep coming in and sit with me as we were interviewing other candidates for this position. As we did that, she realized that she had the exact same qualifications as the men we were interviewing for that position. And that gave her the confidence to move forward. So, yeah, just for whatever reason, and it's really too much to get into here, a lot of women are kind of trained by society to not believe in ourselves. And we don't always apply for these kinds of positions. So what you need to do is to widen your networking efforts to make sure you're looking at absolutely everyone. We face a lot more inertia to getting our foot in the door. Okay, this is hard. So many times when you try to talk to people in tech about even a very small behavioral thing they might have done that is not helpful, it gets defensive very, very, very quickly. And I think part of this problem is, being self-identifying yourself as a racist or a sexist or a homophobe is nearly impossible because we get all these messages from society that these things are bad, they're terrible. So what ends up happening is you tell yourself, hey, I'm not a bad person, I'm a nice guy, I care about women. You think of this extreme example and you say, I'm not that, and you self-identify yourself as a nice person, and you're unable to hear any of the criticism there. And I want to be straight up with you. I think we could do a better job with this as a society of giving people a break. I think we have a really unfortunate tendency to, when someone makes one mistake, often unconscious, often unintentional, of kind of crucifying them about it, to be honest. I make mistakes all the time in my field. I've told you about some today. I don't think that makes me a bad person, We have got to get past this so we can hear about these behavior problems and move forward. I think it's really, really telling. In all the years I've been speaking about women in tech issues, I have almost never had a guy come up to me afterwards and say, hey, Brianna, you know what? I am part of the problem. That's almost never happened. It's always those other guys. It's always the other examples. The truth is, if you think that the problem is someone else, you are a part of the problem. We've talked a lot this year about people of color. And again, to give an example where I have failed. My staff for our last game that we shipped, Revolution 60, happened to be all white people. And I looked at that and I realized that I was not bringing people of color into my own company to evaluate people of color for these positions. And I realized I had a responsibility to change myself, change my networking habits, and make sure I was bringing people of color in for those positions. So this is a mindset where I'm not saying, hey, I'm not a racist. Hey, I have nothing to fix here. Hey, I have no part to play in making it better. This is a very helpful attitude that all of us need to have. Again, this is all about responsibility. It's thinking critically about your behavior. What I love about one of the videos I've seen from Google, an unconscious bias, is, what they found is the science shows if you take one of the things I'm talking about today, if you just take one thing, if you say, hey, I'm not networking enough with women, hey, I am invalidating people's experiences. If you make a commitment to just change one thing today, the science shows that that is going to cause you to start thinking about more things. And it will make you a better person and a better teammate. We all make mistakes. Okay, so, there is a misconception, I feel, in tech that the problem women face is like Don Draper sitting in a tech office somewhere. He's drinking some scotch and talking about how broads can't code, right? That's the hypothetical situation that we think discrimination is in this field. I have never had, from a professional, someone tell me to go back to the kitchen, right? These kind of moments are not the real problem. So what we've kind of set up is this idea in our minds that the real problem is some raging sexist stereotype from the 50s. The science shows that's not quite right. Sexism in tech, according to the science of it, is death by 1,000 cuts. And what happens is it's like every single day you're in this field, if you're someone that's a person of color, someone that's gay, someone that's a woman, you know, you find yourself slowly dying this death of 1,000 cuts. And how that happens is it's little things all day long, like people not inviting you to meetings, people, you know, underestimating your capacity as an engineer, people assuming that you don't know your field, even when you may have dedicated your entire career for it. I had an example yesterday while I was talking about the Apple TV event. I want to tell you straight up, I know more about running the Unreal Engine on, on Apple platforms, Apple mobile platforms, than almost anyone else. You could probably find 20, 30 people maybe in the world that understand this subject as much as I do. And I was talking critically about some of the engineering choices that Apple made when developing this platform, in particular the 200 megabyte limit, which is kind of obviated by a cloud solution. I was inundated by hundreds and hundreds of people writing me, assuming they knew more than I did in this field, and telling me I was wrong when all they had was a rather obvious fact that was mentioned in some tech documents. This is a really good example of a death of 1,000 cuts. Like, this is just one minor thing that happens, but it happens over and over and over and over and over. They're called microaggressions, and they kind of slowly push you out of the field. Another good example, at Apple's event yesterday, they happened to Photoshop a picture of a woman into smiling using the new iPad Pro, right? This is a pretty tone-deaf moment, right? Like, you guys don't understand how often when you're walking down the street, you're instructed to smile. You're told you would be prettier if you would just smile. This happens all the time. So when Apple had not had any women on stage yet at that point, and they're photoshopping a woman into smiling, it's a really tone-deaf moment. That's something that a lot of guys I saw on Twitter just didn't understand. It was just a little thing that was really just kind of obnoxious. And it pushes us away. Yeah, this is a really good example. This happened last year. This is just a slide at a conference, and it's completely tone-deaf. Stuff like that will happen to you almost every single day if you're a woman in this field. What we need you to understand is real sexism in this field is very, very subtle. A good example of this that happened here in Boston is Harmonix. You might have read this week that they got $15 million new in venture capital funding. So, a friend of mine that worked at Harmonix was telling me this story. So she was sitting on a meeting, and they were looking at getting a new person to come in for an engineering position. And the team leader kept using masculine pronouns when asking someone to come in for the job. Well, this engineer, he should have X years of experience with X, Y, and Z. He should be X. He should live in X. He should have this kind of background. And she stopped him in the meeting and said, excuse me, this could be a man or a woman that we hire for this position. This engineer proceeded to then completely talk over her, belittle her objection, and say, this is not a problem. He means everybody. That's just a very small thing that happens. It's subtle. This is a really hard thing to understand. And this is something, again, I've had to learn this in my lifetime. The absence of privilege is not oppression. And I say this with all respect to all the male engineers in this room. This is a system that really, really works for you. So when we're talking about changing this system just a little bit, so other people can come in and you can have awesome people on your team, we are talking about changing things. And I want to be clear, it is going to disrupt some of the boys' club atmosphere that exists in tech. That is not oppression. that is equality. I want to give you a very quick story. So I was over at MIT the other day, and I was giving a presentation. Afterwards, I had some people that were really moved by it, and they were telling me stories about being out with drinks with the guys afterwards. And there was this one engineer that was on the team, and he was sitting there. He was having drinks out with his buddies. And he was really, really angry about the talk that I gave. And he was talking about how he felt like he had never fit in anywhere in his whole life, something I have a lot of empathy for. I can understand that because I felt the entire same way growing up. So what he was saying was he was really, really scared that tech was going to change to this place where he couldn't have bro time. He couldn't have pictures of bikini girls on his screensaver, and it would be like a different kind of atmosphere. As much as my heart goes out to that person, because I think we all have a need to want to belong to a social group, it's not fair for him to prioritize his own comfort over just equality for gay people, for women, for people of color. The culture of tech has been built in your own image. I was at PAX Dev 2 weeks ago, and I found myself, there was this weirdest moment that I had, it was a 23-year-old kid, he's a white guy, and he's sitting there talking to me. And he was talking about how he was terrified he was never going to find an engineering position. And the whole time I was sitting there talking to him, I was realizing all the assumptions I had in my mind. He looked like an engineer. Like he had kind of messy hair and, just wearing a t-shirt at a professional event. He kind of looked like that stereotype. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, of course he's going to find a job. And I found myself saying, I don't know anything about his technical expertise. I don't know anything about his education. I don't know anything about how well he plays with others. But he looks like the part, right? It's just another example of the entire tech industry being built in your image. And when you close your eyes and think about someone working in this field, it probably doesn't look like me or other women. And the truth is, I get so much hate mail in speaking out against this. This is before Gamergate that I got this. This is just absolutely terrible. And it's stuff like this I get every single day speaking out about this. This is something that would be a benefit to everyone here to understand. Let's be straight up. Tech is going to change. The momentum is on the side of women and people of color and other minorities. We are talking about these problems more and more and more. And I feel very confident that tech in 10 years is going to look different than it does today. I grew up in Mississippi, which is a state that was described by MLK as sweltering with the heat of injustice and oppression. Growing up, I sure did meet a lot of people that were extremely homophobic or racist. And even in my own social groups in college, I would find these people. And what would inevitably happen, especially with gay rights, is we kind of have this person there that was kind of ranting about gay people being able to get married, and they'd slowly be pushed out of our social circle. Do you know what I mean? Like they just had views that were kind of dated, and we started moving away from them. In the same way, I'm talking about this in utterly pragmatic terms. This change is happening. Your workforce will include more women in the future. So it's not just that this is the right thing to do. This is to your own career advantage to develop these skills, to learn to work with other people. One of the best skills for any tech professional is being able to work well with the team. A lot of times when I talk about women in tech issues, there's this assumption that women in tech is just a chick thing, right? Like, oh, well, that's just a woman problem, and I don't really have to deal with that. I was at a tech event last night. There was a VIP event with investors and women startup founders. As much as I love events like that, it sometimes feels like there's a trade-off in this field where, kind of the powers that be will let, women go have our lunches over here, and they'll pay for us to have an auditorium and do some networking events. But nothing really changes. I'm going to tell you, in all honesty, straight up, sexism in tech is not a problem with women's behavior. I'm going to say that one more time. Sexism in tech is not a problem with women's behavior. This is a male behavior problem. I can be up here and I can speak to you about changing this, but the only person that can make this better is you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a conversation right now. I will answer any question in the entire world. So who's going to be brave enough to put their hand up first? We will do that.
Hi, thanks for having the courage to come here and give this talk.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Your slides are refreshingly direct. I didn't expect them to be that so, because I found that people don't seem to respond to them that well. But in your experience, if you're with a bunch of people, one of them makes a comment that they don't understand,
Right.
might be inappropriate. Have you found it's better to actually be more direct with them and say than just say straight up that's wrong, instead of saying, well, maybe you could, maybe it's not quite like that?
Yeah.
Or,
That's a wonderful question. Let me answer it equally directly. If you're a woman and you do that, and you have that direct conversation, you'll get tremendous blowback, which is why so many of the women I know in game dev are very, very careful about dancing around this issue and just hinting to it as subtly as you can, because you get so much blowback. This is where you personally can do the most good in the entire world. So, with the Gamergate thing, we do have men on our field that are speaking out. Like Chris Clue is one of them. Author Chu would be another. They don't get a fraction of the death threats that I get, or Anita gets, or Zoe Quinn gets, or Randy Harper gets. So what happens is when you have that male privilege, you are able to kind of pull your buddy aside and be like, hey, can we just talk about that? That's not really cool, what you just said. And just have an open conversation with them about that. That is almost no risk for you. So I think if you're a woman, you need to realize there's going to be blowback for that. I personally made the choice to just answer it directly. I'm not Oprah Winfrey again. But this is where I would really ask guys to step up and help us out. You can do so much good. You have no idea. So let's go to another question.
I suspect most of the people here in the room are probably on your side, are probably very receptive to this message.
Thank you.
And yeah, I am too. And thank you for coming to give the talk. Do you think it's better to try to engage people who aren't here and maybe wouldn't be as receptive, or do you think it's better for them to come to this conversation of their own volition?
Sure, I think that's a really good question. Did anyone else here see the piece on Vox last week that was talking about what nerds don't understand about politics by Dr. Voxham? Did you see that? That was a 10 out of 10 talk. So I called up that writer on the phone afterwards, and I started asking him that exact question, how we could get that answer. So let me tell you about the science of it, because I know Google nerds love science. So he has a lot of expertise in climate change denial. So people that don't want to believe in global warming. So what happens is with some people, you're correct, it's impossible to change their minds. There's nothing that you can say that is ever going to make them feel differently on that. You cannot scientifically change someone's opinion. What you can change scientifically is someone's behavior. So the human mind has this really interesting trait that we like to think of ourselves as rational creatures, but we're not. We have this psychological trick where we decide how we want to feel, and then our minds act like lawyers and justify the thing that we want to believe. And if you're a programmer, you've learned to short circuit that to a certain extent. Like, we tend to be very logical creatures. But that is the overall human tendency there. So you can't change someone's opinion. You can change their behavior. So what happens if you make a social cost to that person doing something. If every single time they speak up, they face consequences for that, even if it's just somebody going, hey, that's not really cool. Hey, that made me feel uncomfortable. Hey, you didn't really, can you think about it this way maybe? What happens over time is you change that behavior. And then this psychological trick where you decide how you want to feel and then the mind justifies it, you decide that you want to feel like not doing this because the social cost is less. And then your attitudes slowly start to change. So with the climate change denial thing, this would be if you can get through any way possible to get tax rebates to get people to put solar panels on their roof to save on energy efficiency. What they found when you do that is their opinions change. So you can have the most dedicated climate change denier, but once they get that government tax rebate to put solar panels on their roof, suddenly they're a proponent of renewable energy. It's exactly the same way in the field. So scientifically, that is the best weapon that we have. Do we have another question?
So, first of all, thank you for the choice you're making. I cannot imagine choosing to live a life where death threats were just sort of a background fact of it.
It's really bad.
I think it's necessary to have conversation in this space where there would be people like you, so I'm grateful for you for doing something I don't think I'd be able to do. So, the question I was curious about asking is, do you have some understanding or intuition about where the depth of vitriol comes from?
Sure.
I mean, some of it I buy as being the confusion between absence of privilege and oppression, and I get that, but it doesn't feel like enough to me, and there's something about it that I'm just not wrapping my brain around.
Oh, I've spent an entire year thinking about this question. This is very insightful. So this is as best as I can figure it out, because that's getting at the core of the problem, which I love. So, how many people here are gamers? Can you raise your hand if you're a gamer? Great. So, the biggest mistake my parents ever made was getting me a Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985. I remember opening that box at Christmas, and I remember my grades went to hell. I stopped socializing, I stopped doing my chores, and that is all I did. I'm still doing it. But what I remember about that era, and this was 30 years ago, Mario turns 30 soon, guys. This is really amazing. What I remember about this era was how marketed the product was for boys. And this shows up in all these subtle ways. Do you know there have only been 2 core Mario games where you could play as a girl character, Princess Peach? The first one was Super Mario 2 in 1988. And then as far as the core Mario titles, we had to wait 25 years for Princess Peach to be playable again. And this kind of making this a boys' space, it was very deliberately chosen by the Nintendo marketing team back in 1985. They said that they were targeting boys between 5 and 10. Then when the Super Nintendo came out in 1982, they just rewrote the same document and said, we are targeting boys 5 to 15 now. So what has happened is, I think we'd like to say that the problem is a bunch of misogynistic 15-year-olds. And that is part of the problem. But I think if you want to look at it more deeply, there are all these unconscious messages that have been telling boys, now 35-year-old men, right, that games are their space. It's not women's space. And it happens in all these subtle ways, right? Princess Peach is always waiting to be rescued in the castle. When women are in games, we are frequently over-sexualized, right? We're always the sidekick or the damsel in distress, and we have huge giant boobs and lots of cleavage out. And what it is 1,000 unconscious signals that have been sent to men saying, this is for you, this is not for women. And they have this intellectual shortcut where they might be theoretically fine with women playing games, but the instant we bring our lived experience into it and say, well, it really hurts me to never be able to be the playable character in a game. Well, I'd like to see a woman larger than size 6 represented in a video game. You know, all these, how many games can you think of where you've seen a mom as a playable character? Like, do you know what percentage of women are going to have kids in their lifetime? So it's like, it's all unconscious by the people in our field, but they feel it's kind of the same as politics. Like, certain people feel their identity is being taken away and they get very defensive. Did you have a follow-up?
I do, but
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Well, just if I take what you're saying and I sort of take it, just sort of trying and wrap my brain around it, what I'm hearing is that there is, people create or adopt or dive into spaces that are restricted to one set of people when they are threatened by
Correct.
those other set of people. So I'm hearing you as saying that the people who are feeling, and I mean, you can look at what they say online and it's pretty clear too.
Yeah.
But
Look through my Twitter mentions sometimes.
no.
You'll see it,
Saying that there is a class of men that feel threatened by the presence of women in gaming seems a little obvious. But it does bring up the next question, which is sort of why? What's going on there that those people feel like they need that space to feel safe?
Let me tell you another quick story. I grew up in Mississippi. So my senator at the time, Trent Lott, I actually worked for him one summer, so we'll leave that there. Don't judge me. I was very young. So my Senator Trent Lott once did a study for the Republican Party in the South. And I'm keeping this very apolitical. We're just talking about facts here, okay? So he did a study looking at what would drive voter behavior to vote for the Republicans that year. So they tested all these questions, like the Democrats want to raise taxes, blah, blah, blah. They found this one question that raised through the roof the response of it. And the question was, the Democrats want to take away your culture. And white Southern males just responded off the charts to this, just ridiculously high. So what happens is there's a really deep set evolutionary part of our brain where we are programmed, from back when we were living in caves, to have in-groups and out-groups. And we're just programmed to say, we are in this group, and then this group over here is the other, and they are a threat. And you can see that portrayed all through history, through war, through all of this stuff. So what's happening is it's really tapping into this very reptilian, primordial part of the brain where people feel like this is their in-group, their identity is based in it, and they're scared it's going to be taken away. So, let's see.
I just wanted to pass on a question from
Go ahead.
a speaker last month, Alyssa Shavinsky, who just wanted to know what we might see next from you and also how friends can help with anything you're working on.
Oh, that's a really great question. I love her. You should check out her book. So what I am working on next is, as if dealing with Gamergate were not big enough for me, we are working on the venture capital scene right now to do a multi-million-dollar expansion. And I can't talk about some of it, but we are very interested in what we're calling emotional gameplay dynamics. So to me, I feel like we have reinvented this wheel for 30 years in the video game industry. How many first-person shooters have you played? Because let's be honest, Call of Duty is not that different than Doom. It's like we keep reinventing this same idea because it's the same people there. What we are doing is taking a step back from the entire video game industry, from all the assumptions that we've made, and we're saying, what is the goal in the video game industry? And to me, the goal is the holodeck. The goal is the holodeck, and to go and interact with different kinds of people in emotional ways and learn things about yourself along the way. So as we really have an explosion in VR technology, we have some very interesting ideas about frameworks to develop for this. So we are raising millions of dollars for that. As far as how to help me, guys, if I personally dealt with all of my death threats myself, I would not do anything else with my time. It's just too much of it. And it's sad, but I'm just being straight with you. Being up here today People will see this video on Google, I will get threats, I will get attacked, and I have to employ at my company a full-time person to deal with my harassment, to talk to prosecutors, to talk to the FBI, to document this stuff, because I could not work in this field if I did. So I have a Patreon where people can help pay for that position, because startups don't have room for extra positions to pay people to file death threat charges with prosecutors. So that's how you can help. Maybe we'll give a link to that in the video. Thanks for that question.
Stepping back to the attitudes that lead to the horribleness. It makes me wonder, were the cultural watchdogs right all along that these games were corrupting us during our formative years with destructive attitudes?
Can I tell you the weirdest story about that? So I remember, who else here was a gamer in the 90s with Jack Thompson? Like, do you remember that when they were worried about Mortal Kombat corrupting the youth? And I remember being a teenager and being like, oh, that's so stupid, that's so dumb, that's so full of crap. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I want to tell you an experience that I had. So they're coming out with Hatred, which is this game that's a mass murder simulator. And you have a certain person on Steam that is demanding the creators add modifiable tools so people can put me in that game to kill, and Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian. So I have gamers that want to do that. And I keep thinking back to being a teenager. My strong opinion about violence doesn't matter. And look, I'm just being straight up. I don't have an answer there. Like, I think we should be able to make whatever games that we want. I'm certainly not pro-censorship. But I think something's really wrong in our industry. And I think we need to think about that. So, yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to tell you we need to like start censoring games. I don't. I think it's impossible in an age of digital distribution. But what I do believe is that Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and Steam have a responsibility to think about the product that they're putting out. When Steam reversed their decision and did decide to release Hatred, which, guys, this is made by neo-Nazis. It's a white power thing to just go kill people. And you'll watch the trailer and there's a woman begging on her knees for her life, and you'll like stick a shotgun in her mouth and kill her. It is horrific. And I don't think you should censor that by the government. And I think in an age of digital distribution, anyone can play that game if they want. So, I think we should do that. Can we do 2 questions super quickly? Great.
You mentioned a couple of microaggressions. You mentioned mansplaining and interrupting. I wonder if there's any others you want to call out, maybe anything that's specific to the software development environment.
I think a really big one would be assuming women do not know their stuff. That's a really, really big one. It hurts a lot, I think, talking over women in meetings. And let me say this, I love gender neutral examples. Look, a lot of us here are software engineers. Almost all the engineers I know are introverts, right? Like, I'm not, but the vast majority are. What I have noticed in running my company is if I don't take a firm hand, the extroverts end up talking over everyone, and introverts can't get a word in edgewise. This includes a lot of women. So if you are a product manager, you have a strong responsibility as a team leader to shut down the extroverts like me from monopolizing the entire conversation and letting everyone be heard. I could go into a whole bunch of them, but I think that's a good example. Last question.
So I was wondering, so there was a time, right, in the late tube and early transistor days when computer operators were mostly women because it was like switchboard operation. It was basically seen as secretarial. And my question was, are there any lessons we can draw from kind of the path of computing? There was a time when it was indeed mostly women. It wasn't a prestigious position. It became a prestigious position. Men came in.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can learn from the early part of that history?
Yeah, that's a historical pattern, believe it or not. There's a huge pattern through history of fields coming along and being born. and it starts off as very prestigious and women are drawn to it. And there's this pattern over and over again that men kind of move into the field and end up changing it. So, I would love to tell you what happened in computing in those early days is like an aberration, but it's not. There is so much baggage that women face to working as professional engineers. I see this with some of my friends' children who are 14, 15 right now, and they're put into a culture where beauty culture starts telling them who their friends are, what they look like is so much more important than doing that work we all know is so important, sitting in your bedroom and learning how to code, So there are 1,000 messages like that that we really have to move past as a society. I gotta leave it there today. So thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.